Yes. Good morning to all. I am S.D.Justin, working as an assistant professor in the Information Technology Department in Vivekananda College of Engineering for Women. So this session I will see a few aspects of basics of cloud computing. It is one of the elective subjects which is currently studied by third year engineering students. Basics of cloud computing. So cloud, what is a cloud? Cloud is the data storage in which users can store any kind of data, and this data can be stored by means of internet connections. So in this session I will see that is how this service is offered by cloud service providers. How cloud service providers are offering cloud services to their cloud users. In that they are utilizing a technology called virtualization. The cloud service providers are utilizing a technology called virtualization. There are a number of virtualization mechanisms. So virtualization means creating a virtual copy of the actual, creating a virtual copy of the original. Say for example, creating a virtual copy of the processor, creating a virtual copy of the memory, creating a virtual copy of input devices, creating a virtual copy of the I/O devices, etc., etc. So when we see the types of virtualization, there are various kinds of virtualizations are there. That is CPU virtualization, memory virtualization, then input devices virtualization, output devices virtualization, virtual clusters and resource management, okay, etc., etc. So we will see in this session. We will see then what is virtual clusters and how resource management is carried out in virtual clusters. So when we see what is a cluster is a group of 2 or more computers that run in parallel to achieve a common goal. That is the basic idea behind cluster. It is a group of 2 or more computers that run in parallel to achieve a common goal. Why we are grouping 2 or more computers, or why we are grouping 2 or more nodes? That is, it has to perform a common goal, a particular goal. So here the cluster allows workloads consisting of a high number of individual parallelizable tasks to be distributed among the nodes in the cluster. When the computers are grouped as a cluster, the computer systems are distributed on various locations and the distributed systems are assigned by various tasks. When these tasks are integrated together, the common goal can be achieved. So when we see what is before discussing virtual cluster, we should know that what is a physical cluster. Physical cluster is a collection of server systems which are interconnected by a physical network. What is a physical cluster? It is a collection of physical computer server machines. So physical cluster is a collection of physical servers, and these physical servers are interconnected by a physical network. This is physical cluster. But here we will see what is a virtual cluster. Virtual clusters are built with virtual machines which are installed at distributed servers from 1 or more physical clusters. So when we want to create a virtual cluster, we need to have physical clusters. Physical cluster is the collection of physical servers, whereas virtual clusters is the collection of virtual machines. What is a virtual machine? Virtual machine means it is a machine which is running over a physical machine. It is a machine which is running over a physical machine. When we see here, in this example, here we shall see that what is virtual machine and what is a physical machine. Physical machine is the typical system, typical machine or typical system which we are using for our purpose. That is physical machine. Say for example, when we are using a typical computer system, that is a physical machine. Whereas what is a virtual machine? that is when we are creating a virtual machine over our physical machine, that machine is referred as virtual machine. Virtual machine, that is once we create, that is if we have a physical machine, we can create two or more virtual machines. So when you see this diagrammatical representation, here we have a physical machine. Along with the physical machine, here we have three virtual machines. Okay, three virtual machines. So in the same way, physical clusters are the combination of virtual machines, and these virtual machines are installed at distributed servers. For example, when we see this example, here we can differentiate what is a physical cluster and what is a virtual cluster. So in this diagrammatical representation, here we have three physical clusters. Physical cluster can be combination of physical machines. Physical cluster 1 is a group of physical machines as well as virtual machines. Physical cluster 2, it is a combination of virtual machines as well as physical machines. Likewise, physical cluster 3, it is a combination of physical machines as well as virtual machines. Whereas, what is a virtual cluster? That is, a physical cluster may contain combination of physical machines as well as virtual machines, whereas virtual cluster is a group or it is a collection of virtual machines. These virtual machines are logically interconnected. Logically interconnected by means of logical network. When we see this example, here we have four virtual clusters. That is virtual cluster 1, virtual cluster 2, virtual cluster 3 and virtual cluster 4. So all these virtual clusters, the virtual clusters can be horizontally interconnected or vertically interconnected. When we see the first virtual cluster 1, here we have eight virtual machines. 8 virtual machines are horizontally interconnected. And when we see virtual cluster 2, that is 3 virtual machines are logically interconnected. When we see virtual cluster 3, here we have 10 virtual machines are logically interconnected. Likewise, virtual cluster 4, we have 6 virtual machines are logically interconnected. This is what given here. That is the physical cluster 1 consists of 10 virtual machines. Okay, virtual machine 1, virtual machine 2, virtual machine 3, virtual machine 4, etc. up to 10 virtual machines. That can be logically grouped into 2 or more virtual clusters, that is different. But what is the difference between virtual clusters and physical cluster is, physical cluster is the collection of physical machines and virtual machines, whereas virtual cluster is the collection of virtual machines. What are the properties of these virtual clusters? When we see the properties of virtual clusters, the virtual cluster nodes can be either physical or virtual machines. So in this example, when we see the virtual cluster structure, the virtual cluster nodes can be either physical machines or virtual machines. So the virtual cluster can contain physical machines as well as virtual machines. Multiple virtual machines running with different operating systems can be deployed on the same physical node. Multiple virtual machines running with a different operating system. So when we see multiple virtual machines, say for example, what are multiple virtual machines? When we see the physical structure of these clusters, in that we see that is a physical cluster as well as virtual cluster. Yes. So when we see this diagrammatical representation, it consists of that is physical machine as well as virtual machine. The virtual machine consists of guest OS. Whereas the physical machine consists of the host OS. The typical OS which is running on the physical machine is referred to as host OS, whereas the operating system which is running on the virtual machine is referred to as guest OS. So this is what gives the virtual clusters. So the virtual cluster nodes can be either physical machines or virtual machines. That is, when we have a virtual cluster, the cluster consists of group of physical machines as well as group of virtual machines, or combination of both virtual machines and physical machines. That is the structure of the virtual machine. A virtual cluster consists of, that is the structure of the virtual cluster. So a virtual cluster consists of group of physical machines as well as virtual machines. Then we see the next property of virtual cluster. Multiple virtual machines running with different operating systems can be deployed on the same physical node. That is, we have a physical machine. Over this physical machine, we have two or more virtual machines. In that case, virtual machine 1 can run with one operating system. Say for example, virtual machine 1 can run with the Sun Solaris, virtual machine 2 can run with Mac OS, virtual machine 3 can run with the Linux operating system, etc. etc. This is the meaning. So the second property says that multiple virtual machines running with different operating systems can be deployed on the same physical node. And when we see the third property of virtual clusters, the virtual machine run with a guest OS, which is often different from the host OS. It is often different from the host OS. So, if I say for example, if the host OS is Windows, the guest OS can be different from Windows OS. That is, the guest OS can be Mac OS, like that. Okay. So the virtual machine runs with the guest OS is often different from host OS. So in this case, the host OS manages resources in the physical machine, whereas guest OS is not managing the resources in the physical machine. So in this way, the virtual clusters are structured. And the purpose of using virtual machines is to consolidate multiple functionalities on the same server. So what is the purpose of using virtual machines? So the purpose of virtual machine is to consolidate multiple functionalities on the same server. Say for example, one virtual machine can be assigned by one functionality, virtual machine 2 can be assigned by another functionality. When we integrate these functionalities, then the application can be consolidated. So the purpose of using virtual machines is to consolidate multiple functionalities on the same server. So in this case, when we consolidate multiple functionalities on the same server, this will greatly enhance server utilization and application flexibility. So here the virtual machine can be replicated in multiple servers. Say for example, the identifier of the virtual machine is 3, VM3 virtual machine 3. It can be replicated on various servers for the purpose of promoting distributed parallelism, fault tolerance, and disaster recovery. Say for example, if one physical server is degraded or failed, then the other since this is replicated on another server, so it can be taken over by another server. So these are the various properties of virtual clusters. So the next session I will see how the resources can be managed.